After we found a place to put all 10 names, then they said we were ready to launch. You see the patches of the 3 distinct missions on this mission. This is a couple of hours before the liftoff, and again, at this point, here it is 2 hours and 38 minutes to go. We're mostly thinking about not too distant future. We really want to make sure that we're remembering all of the things that the people taught us. During the suit up, you try to concentrate on what you're doing right here and now. You really don't want to think about any of the problems that you may have going up to get Shep. The best thing to do is concentrate. And here's Andy getting ready for his, he was the last American to fly on the Mir space station, and now he was going up to the International Space Station. And then Paul Richards on his first flight. You can ask him after the video what he was thinking at that time.
Okay, this is the walkout here, and what we're going to see next is as you get out to the Discovery, they're going to strap all of us in one at a time. It always starts with the commander. So we'll see Jim Weatherby getting strapped into his commander seat here. And then they follow that up by kind of going back and forth, one on the flight deck, Wex here, and then they go to the mid-deck, strap in Yuri Usachev, and then they go back and forth to the other crew members. And we sit there, we're on the launch pad for a couple hours actually before launch as they get everything ready to go and get the vehicle all set and then clear the launch pad so that no one's around. The next scene you're going to see is actually coming up after the strap-in is of the launch itself, and in the upper left-hand corner there'll be an inset, which is actually a video out the starboard overhead window.
9, 8, 7, go for main engine. 4, 3, 2. Liftoff of Discovery and a team of explorers shaping their destiny.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is complete and Discovery is now in a heads down, wings level position, carrying the next resident crew to the International Space Station.
Discovery, go ahead, throttle up. Go, Paul.
Now as we keep heading uphill, you heard some of the calls that go back and forth between the commander and the ground control team, letting us know what phase of flight we're in. This will be the solid rocket booster separation coming up here, and you actually get a little view of it out the overhead window again as well. Pretty impressive. The view on the upper left again is out the overhead starboard window. What comes up next is we got up to a little over Mach 13, and we actually do a roll from a heads down attitude to a heads up attitude, and you'll see that through the window here. And we had kind of a unique view out the overhead window. We tilted the camera a little bit to get a little bit better view going uphill. One of the things that we hadn't gotten a whole lot of video before, you can see here, this is going through about Mach 23. You can see a little bit of plasma in the upper windows. And then, of course, we come off the external tank, which you can see flying away there. And finally, about the last thing we do once we're getting up and getting ready to go is open up the payload bay doors.
This is a view taken from Space Station as we were performing the rendezvous. The rendezvous consists of thirds. The first third actually starts on the launch pad. All of the first third of the rendezvous is controlled by computers, automatically controlled. The middle third of the rendezvous, we use computer guidance, but we manually fly, going exactly where the computers tell us to. And then for the final one third of the rendezvous in this sequence here, we're mostly looking out the window. We do have some tools that we use, a laser rangefinder system and a rendezvous radar to give us the very precise information needed for the rendezvous. The vehicle performs so well, it's so well designed by the contractors around the country that you're able to put it within inches of where you need to. Although you're flying at a speed of 17,000 miles an hour, the relative speed is about a tenth of a foot per second as you're finally closing for the docking. Yuri, of course, is very happy because we have gotten to his home, and here we are opening the door.
And we're all waiting on the inboard side of the station for the Discovery crew. There's Sergei opening the docking hatch there. This is kind of the food frenzy when everybody's flying around hugging each other inside. This is now our quarterdeck on station. We have a bell in the upper right corner where over Paul's head there, and this is where we gong everybody on and off. It's kind of a shipboard tradition that we hope will be continued. This is just an external view looking up the stack at the lab and station.
And we had a lot of work to do. This is getting ready for the first spacewalk. That's Susan getting in the lower part of the spacesuit. You can see it takes several people to help you get dressed. And this is Jim Voss getting in his glove, and again Susan putting her helmet on. This was one of 2 spacewalks that we performed. Each spacewalk putting critical elements. And this is coming out of the hatch. Jim comes out of the hatch. We have a thermal cover that's on the outside. They already opened the inner hatch, and he attaches himself to the arm and starting to prepare to put many modules on. One of these modules we had to move. It was already up there, but we need to put the cargo module, the MPLM, there, so we had to move this pressurized mating adapter to another place. So Jim and Susan got that ready from the outside by taking cables off. This is another cradle assembly, kind of a building block that we put on the laboratory module to later attach another piece of space station. So we're stowing that there, and another crew will come up and continue the construction of space station. And you can see it, as it looks, it's very easy to move some of these large masses that are a couple hundred pounds, sometimes thousands of pounds across. And this is Jim and Susan on the laboratory module installing that cradle assembly. And this is the view from inside. We have robotic operators, and for the first spacewalk, I was the person inside calling out the procedures to Jim and Susan. This is Susan manipulating some wires. These are actually a wire tray to connect up, some rigid umbilical it's called. And Andy actually helping moving the arm around.
At the end of the EVA, we had the task of moving the module you see in the upper part there, the dark shape colored module. And I used the arm to do that. I brought the arm in and grappled the module. When it was secure on the arm, we released it from the side of the station and then proceeded to drive it around the side of the station to put it on the port side, or the left side here, as you can see. Moving this module with the arm was a relatively easy task, even though it weighs many thousands of pounds. It may be weightless, but it has mass. To help me align it with the station for the reinstallation, Paul set up a very sophisticated computer system, which you can see him doing here, so that I was then able to drive the arm on, knowing confidently that it would be positioned. Once it was on and latched onto the side of the station, we were able to release the remote manipulator system from the module. The next task that came the following day was again using the arm, and you can see here it's preparing to lift the module that you see in the center of the picture in the payload bay up out of the payload bay to install it on the station. This module weighs about 20,000 pounds and contains about 4 tons or 9,000 pounds of supplies for the second expedition. We had to bring it up, and as you see there, mate it to the side of the space station so that the expedition crews would be able to access it and start unloading it.
Here I am opening the hatch with Jim Voss and Yuri helping, and once we're inside, I guess part of the we missed a cable there that we needed to power up the inside of the MPLM that happened to be in the MPLM before we hooked up. That was kind of a surprise, but we quickly recovered. And inside, Jim's moving a rack here. You can see that the MPLM is really a spacious module. It's a lot bigger than we were ready for. It's just a really well-built, spacious piece of gear, and it's going to serve us well in space station, hauling stuff up and down, I'm sure. And here's moving one of the, I guess we moved about 6 racks. This is one of them that we moved from the MPLM into the lab. It was tight, but easy if you went slow to control it, and make sure that, I don't think we even put a scratch on a rack doing that.
And we were going out for a second spacewalk. This time Andy and I get to go out. And here you see us suited up in getting ready to suit up, checking our cameras. and our equipment. And once again, here's Andy getting ready and getting the lower part of his suit on, and myself doing the same thing. And you can see the different color codes. Mine was a candy stripe, Andy was a broken barber pole, and you can see that's how we're identified. And then it's a tight squeeze to get up into the suit, but much easier in zero-G than down here on the Earth. Some things do get easier in space. And again, we have a lot of equipment floating around and a lot of people helping us to get ready and into our suits. And now it's my turn to get in the suit. You see some of the other equipment we're wearing is those long johns have liquid cooling tubes, and that helps us keep cool during the spacewalk. Outside on a spacewalk, it can be minus 250 degrees and plus 250 degrees, all kind of at the same time on different areas of the space station. And here's Susan, who was our IV, or the person inside who choreographs and helps us with our procedures getting ready. And Sergei Krikaloff also helping suit us up and getting the helmets on and checking and rechecking to make sure that all the connections are secure. And once again, we come out the door, and here's Andy coming out. And we actually came out at a night pass, and you can see by Andy's helmet lights that they're on, and that helps illuminate our work areas. Andy's hooking up a tether. We always tether ourselves and our equipment to make sure we have control over it. And that's Andy and I working outside together, and I believe this was close to the end of the EVA when we were gathering our tools. This was the power tool that you guys keep hearing about that I helped design with a bunch of people up at Goddard, and I finally got to use it. Although it was only on 2 bolts, I wanted to take more of the station apart with it, but they wouldn't let me. And this is one of the stowage platforms that Andy and I removed from the shuttle, and Andy would be up on the arm installing it.
And here you see I've received that platform from Paul, who's underneath the sill there, and my job is to carry it up while being lifted on the arm up to the side of the space station, where there's a trunnion pin where we can install it. And here you see I'm just holding it as the arm slowly lifts me up out of the payload bay. And as you can imagine, it was a great sensation to be suspended over the shuttle like that, carrying this device. Here we are at the top of the station, near the full reach limit of the arm, and Paul and I are installing this device onto the side of the station there. This will enable replacement and spare units and components for the space station to be installed and stored outside for later use. There you see a view of the lab with someone in the lab window. The next job we had was back in the payload bay. I had the task of removing this large replacement pump unit from the platform that we'd brought it up, and actually going to take it up and put it on that stowage platform that we had just installed a few moments before. This pump unit weighs about 400 pounds, but you can see it's in zero gravity. It's really fairly easy to remove it. And once again, the arm lifted me up out of the payload bay and carried me around up towards the lab structure high above us, so that we could install this and mate it to the side of the space station where it still is, and it will be available there for future crews to use to replace other pump systems in the event that there's a failure. This is just a view coming up past the lab window up to the installation site, high up on the side of the space station. Here you see Paul attending to cables that were also routed, and he's making his way down past the work site to another work site where we had to do some cable installation.
And the other cables that we have to install are for yet another crew to come up and put on the robotic arm. These are a tray of cables, a rigid umbilical we call it, and we had to actually open up some of the panels on the laboratory, and you see Andy off the arm there connecting some of those cables. And then the next site was Andy going up to the P6 here, all the way up this truss to the top of the station where the solar arrays are located. And we were going to do some troubleshooting on those. One of the solar array latches had not locked. They had 3 of 4 locked, which were good enough, but they wanted to get that 4th one. So they let Andy and I go up there, and Andy is translating up there in the day. I was working on something else and came up at night. So the view that Danny had and we have of him is pretty incredible. It shows you just how large the station is compared to a human. And this is Andy coming back into the from the top of these solar arrays and showing us coming back in, inventorying our tools, making sure we have everything with us and we don't leave anything outside, because this was the last spacewalk and we have to secure the equipment. And we had some film left over and we were able to start taking a few pictures of ourselves. We try not to come in with any film unexposed.
And this is the closure of the EVA, crawling back into the hatch. And even though you're weightless, of course, you have a very massive, bulky suit on, and it just gives you some idea of the difficulty you have moving through confined spaces when you do one of these EVAs. And here I am pulling the cover up as the first stage of closing out the hatch to terminate the EVA. While the EVA was in progress and after the EVAs, we continued with the transfer operations in the MPLM. Here you see Expedition 1 and Expedition 2 crew members transferring bags of equipment from the racks that were in the MPLM and carrying them over to station, and also bringing back old equipment from the station that was stored in the module for return to Earth. And here you see Expedition 2 crew and Bill Shepard down there loading bags of equipment. Once the module was complete and fully loaded for return, we demated it from the side of the station using, once again, the robotic arm, and carefully carried it down back into the payload bay of the orbiter, where it was latched in for the return trip back to Earth. Once we'd put it in the payload bay, we then able to release the arm from the module.
This is the next day, and this is the handover that Yuri and I had to change command on board. And believe me, this was a pretty electric moment up in space there. And we had getting ready to close the hatch. This is looking down, well, actually up into station, sorry. And the docking adapter hatch here from the airlock side. Glad to see the commander is finally doing some work on this mission.
This begins the scenes of the undock and fly around. As you can see, it gets pretty crowded in the aft flight deck. We basically had 6 people on the aft flight deck using the windows and all the controls, and Wex was in the front backing things up, so all 7 people up on the flight deck. Pretty spectacular. We did the undock at night, and you can see it just really gently slides away from the station. And we actually back away and then go to a different mode and start what's called a fly around. And we basically did 1 1/4 laps around the station. We started out in front of the station in the direction of motion, and then went up to the top so we could see the space station below us, and then actually did a full lap from there to go all the way above it to underneath it, so we were looking directly up into space, and then back up to the top again. This is pretty critical to get around, and we actually do a complete photo survey of the outside of the International Space Station as we do this full lap, so we can see any changes that have occurred, anything that's going on.
After undock, we're getting ready to come back, and we had a little exercise there to get ready for landing, and this is a fluid dynamics experiment that we were doing that was really just for fun, showing you how water reacts. And
12 days earlier, we put a tremendous amount of energy into the orbit of the vehicle with millions of pounds of explosive propellant, and the only way to take that energy out on entry day is to slam into the atmosphere. Of course, we do get a little bit taller up in space, and so it was quite a tight fit, making sure we get into our spacesuits for landing. But as we slam into the atmosphere, you have millions of atomic particles whizzing by the window, and you see a 25-mile-long trailing plume of fire that pulsates and oscillates as we fire the jets. Here we are on the final approach for landing. We were trying to get a crosswind test. We had the winds up above the limits that we've flown to before, and couple of seconds prior to touchdown, the winds subsided, came down less than the limit, and then right after touchdown, the winds picked up again. So we were either lucky or unlucky, depending upon your point of view. The vehicle does fly very well. It's very smooth, very well designed by the folks years ago. As we roll out, Vegas Kelly, my trusty pilot, puts the drag chute out to help us slow down. We bring the vehicle to a coasting stop. It will fly one more time, and then it'll go off to Palmdale for refurbishment. The Expedition 1 crew came back in recumbent seats, and they had medical experiments, and they were transported back to the crew quarters for continuation of their rehabilitation and medical experiments.